I stood outside our house, staring at the darkened windows, trying to process what I had just seen. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the distant hum of the city. A part of me wanted to storm back in, demand answers, force Emily to explain how she could betray me like this. Another part, the rational, exhausted soldier in me, knew nothing she said would undo what had already been done. The taxi I had taken was still idling by the curb. The driver, an older man with tired eyes, glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "You need another ride, buddy?" he asked. I hesitated. I had nowhere to go. This was supposed to be my homecoming, the moment I'd dreamed about for months. Instead, I felt like a stranger on my own doorstep. Before I could answer, the door behind me creaked open. "Wait." Emily's voice was soft, unsure. I turned, hands clenched into fists at my sides. She stood barefoot in the doorway, her robe pulled tighter around her body, as if that could somehow shield her from the consequences of her actions. "Please, let me explain," she said, stepping toward me. Her voice had that familiar pleading tone, the one she used whenever she wanted something from me. The man was nowhere in sight. Probably still inside, hiding, waiting for me to leave. Explain what? My voice was steady, but inside I was anything but calm. "That you thought I was still overseas so you had time to sneak around?" She flinched, her eyes darting to the ground. It's not what you think." "Not what I think?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "I walked in on you wrapped around another man. Tell me, what exactly am I misunderstanding?" Tears welled up in her eyes. I wanted to believe they were real, but after what I had just witnessed, how could I trust anything about her? "I made a mistake," she whispered. I stepped closer, forcing her to meet my gaze. "No, Emily. A mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove. A mistake is missing a bill payment. What you did, that was a choice. A repeated, deliberate choice." Igaditu opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. I shook my head, my anger mounting. "How long?" She hesitated. "How?" "Long?" I demanded, my patience snapping. Her lip trembled. "A few months." Something inside me cracked. Months. While I was thousands of miles away, dodging bullets, missing her, counting down the days until I could hold her again, she had been with someone else. Maybe not just one person. Maybe more. I exhaled sharply, trying to keep control. Was it just him? Her silence was deafening. I took a step back, my heart hammering against my ribs. That's all I needed to know. "Please." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. She had no right to touch me. Not after tonight. Not after everything she had done. I turned without another word, heading down the porch steps. "Where are you going?" she called after me, her voice thick with desperation. I didn't look back. Anywhere but here. The taxi driver was still waiting. I slid into the back seat, slamming the door shut. "Where to?" he asked. I stared out the window, watching Emily standing there, watching me leave, her arms wrapped around herself like she was the victim. I gave the driver the name of the closest. Hotel. As we pulled away, I felt something break inside me. The life I thought I was returning to had never really existed. The hotel room felt empty despite its warmth. A single duffel bag lay on the floor, my only companion in the space that wasn't supposed to be mine. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages from Emily. Some desperate, others defiant. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Don't ignore me, please. I love you. You don't understand what I've been through." That one made me laugh. What she had been through. I tossed the phone onto the nightstand and buried my face in my hands. My heart ached, but not for her. It ached for the life I thought I had, the one she shattered the second she let another man into our bed. A knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. My first instinct was to grab my knife, a habit from too many nights in combat zones. Shaking off the paranoia, I stood and cracked the door open. "Room service," a soft voice said. I hadn't ordered anything. Opening the door fully, I found myself staring at a young woman, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair tied back in a ponytail. Her uniform was crisp, her hands carrying a tray of food. "There must be a mistake," I said. She gave a polite smile. "No mistake. The bartender downstairs sent it. Said you looked like you needed something warm." I glanced down at the tray. A steaming plate of steak and potatoes, a cold beer on the side. My stomach clenched. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I last ate. "Thanks," I muttered, taking the tray. She hesitated before stepping back. You okay?" Something about her voice, genuine concern, caught me off guard. Strangers didn't usually care. I forced a smirk. "Been better," she nodded. "If you need another drink, just ask for Mia." Then she turned and walked away, leaving me alone again. I ate mechanically, not tasting the food, my mind still spinning. Sleep never came. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment I walked into that house. Every detail burned into my brain. Sometime before dawn, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the message. "You deserve to know everything. Meet me at Silver's Cafe. 10 a.m. No name, no explanation. But something inside me knew. This was about Emily, and I needed to hear it. Silver's Cafe was small, tucked between an old bookstore and a bank. A bell chimed as I stepped inside. The air smelled of coffee and fresh bread. A man sat near the window, his fingers drumming against the table. Mid-30s, dark stubble, sharp eyes scanning the room. He saw me and raised a hand. "James." I slid into the seat across from him, studying his face. I'd never met him before, but there was something about his expression, pity mixed with regret, that told me he knew more than he should. "You're the one who sent the message," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, and I know you probably don't want to hear this, but you need to." I leaned back, arms crossed. "Then talk." James exhaled, pulling out his phone. "I work with Emily. Have for years. I've seen things, man, things you wouldn't believe." He placed the phone between us. A video played. Emily, sitting at a bar, laughing, her hand on another man's knee. The timestamp, 5 months ago. My stomach twisted. "That's not the worst of it," James said, swiping to another clip. "Different man, different place, same woman. Picture after picture. Evidence stacked upon evidence. Emily hadn't just cheated, she had built a double life." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "Why are you telling me this?" James hesitated. "Because I hate what she did, and because I know what it's like to be played." I clenched my fists. "She told me it was just one guy." He shook his head. "She's been doing this for over a year. A whole year. While I was fighting to stay alive overseas, she was screwing around like I didn't exist." James slid his phone back into his pocket. "I'm sorry, man. I just thought you should know the truth." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. Truth. Something Emily had never given me. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Thanks for telling me." James gave a short nod. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer because I didn't know yet. All I knew was that Emily had spent a year betraying me, and I wasn't about to let her walk away without consequences. I walked out of Silver's Cafe with a storm brewing inside me. My hands clenched into fists, jaw locked so tight it ached. The images James had shown me wouldn't leave my mind. Emily's laughter, her body pressed against other men, her fingers, tracing patterns on their skin, things she used to do to me. For a whole year, she had lived a life I knew nothing about, and she had the nerve to cry, to beg, to act like this was a simple mistake. I climbed into a cab, barely registering the driver's question before muttering, Take me to Ridgeview Apartments. Emily's workplace. The same office where she'd built her carefully crafted web of lies. I needed to see her, not to argue, not to scream, but to watch her squirm when she realized I knew everything. The building loomed ahead, glass windows reflecting the city's pale morning light. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stepped inside. The receptionist, a young guy who barely glanced up from his computer, greeted me with disinterest. "I'm here for Emily Carter," I said, voice steady. "She's in a meeting," he replied, without looking at me. I gave him a cold smile. "She'll want to make time." Something in my tone made him hesitate. With a reluctant sigh, he picked up the phone. "Mr. Carter here to see you." A pause, then a clipped response. "She says she's busy." Of course she did. I leaned over the desk, my voice low and sharp. "Tell her she has one chance to come out here on her own. If I have to go in there, it won't be quiet." His throat bobbed as he relayed the message. Seconds later, a door opened down the hall. Emily stepped out. Her expression flickered between shock and forced composure. She wore the same professional mask she always did, a fitted blazer, a perfect smile, but her eyes betrayed her. She was nervous. "Ethan," she said smoothly, walking toward me as if we were just another happy couple having a normal day. I said nothing. She stopped a few feet away, glancing around, likely hoping to keep up appearances in front of her colleagues. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I tilted my head, studying her. "You tell me, Emily, what exactly have you been up to?" Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she masked it with a forced laugh. "Look, can we not do this here?" she whispered, stepping closer. The scent of her perfume, once comforting, now suffocating, lingered in the air between us. I leaned in, voice cold. "I know everything." She stiffened. I let the words sink in, watching as her carefully built facade began to crack. "We should talk, somewhere private," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "Oh, now you want privacy?" Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she knew better. She swallowed hard. "Fine. My place. Tonight." I nodded, stepping back. She exhaled, relieved. I let her believe she was still in control. But she had no idea what was coming. That evening, I arrived at the house, the same house I had once thought of as home. Emily was waiting, standing in the living room, wineglass in hand. The moment I stepped inside, she set it down and walked toward me. "Ethan." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "No more lies?" Her lips pressed together, shoulders tense. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Her face drained of color when I hit play. The first video, her at the bar, leaning into some guy whispering in his ear, then another clip, her, outside a hotel, hand wrapped around a different man's wrist, and another, her laughing in a dimly lit room, lips inches from someone else's. She sucked in a sharp breath, hands trembling. "Where did you get that?" I took a slow step forward. "Does it matter?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan, please, no." My voice was sharp, final. "You don't get to cry. You don't get to beg. Not after everything you've done." She shook her head frantically. "I was lonely. You were gone for so long. I laughed bitterly. "Oh, so it's my fault. I was overseas risking my life and your response was to spread your legs for anyone who gave you attention?" She winced. I clenched my jaw. "You could have told me. You could have left. But instead, you stayed, pretending to love me while you slept with other men." Her shoulders shook. "I do love you," I scoffed. "No, Emily. You love yourself, and now you're just scared of losing everything." Her silence told me I was right. I stepped back, my voice calm. "I'm done," she gasped. "Ethan, wait." I pulled out an envelope from my jacket and tossed it onto the coffee table. Divorce papers. She stared at them, her breath catching. You already— I knew the moment I walked in last night, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I was just waiting for confirmation. Her hands trembled as she reached for the papers, her entire world unraveling in front of her. I turned toward the door. Please, she whispered. I didn't stop, didn't look back. The woman I had loved was gone, and so was I. The cold night air hit me as I stepped out of the house that was no longer my home. The weight of betrayal sat heavy in my chest, but with every step I took toward my car, that weight lessened. Emily's pleading whispers still echoed behind me, but I refused to turn back. She had made her choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel for a moment, letting the reality sink in. Divorce papers were on the table, her perfect little world crumbling, but that wasn't enough. She needed to feel what I had felt, the humiliation, the gut-wrenching pain, the moment when everything she thought she had came crashing down. And I knew exactly how to deliver it. The next morning, I sat in a cafe near the courthouse, sipping coffee, waiting. The place was quiet, just a few people scattered around. My phone buzzed. James. It's done. A slow smirk pulled at my lips. I had left Emily with the papers last night, knowing she'd wake up in a panic. She'd scramble to find a way to fix things, to save face. She'd probably even call her family, trying to play the victim. But she had no idea that while she was wallowing in regret, James was taking care of the final nail in her coffin. I texted. Back. Me. Send it. Seconds later, a video appeared on my screen. It was a live feed, Emily's office. Employees huddled around a conference room, eyes locked on the large screen at the front. Some looked uncomfortable, others whispered among themselves, and at the center of it all, Emily, frozen. Wide-eyed, her face drained of color as she watched the video playing in front of everyone, the same clips James had shown me. One by one, they played on the screen. Her, laughing with one man, kissing another, slipping into hotel rooms. The whispers in the room turned to outright gasps. I imagined her heartbeat pounding, her breathing ragged as she realized what was happening. Her colleagues, her boss, watching. Her indiscretions unfold in high definition. James had made sure to time it perfectly. A morning meeting, the entire office gathered, the projector hooked up to the company's internal server. She had built her career on being a respectable woman, the dedicated professional, the loyal wife. And now she was nothing but a joke. Could see it on her face, even through the grainy video. Panic, horror, shame. She lunged for the laptop, trying to shut it off, but it was too late. The damage was done. Her boss stood, shaking his head. Employees whispered. Some even laughed. Then, the screen went black. James ended the feed. I leaned back, savoring the moment. Karma had arrived, swift and brutal. Emily had shattered my world. Now, I had shattered hers. A week passed. I ignored every one of Emily's calls, her texts growing more desperate by the day. She begged. She swore she could change. She even tried guilt, blaming me for ruining her life. But I owed her nothing. I was done being the fool. I stood outside my lawyer's office, the divorce finalized, the ink still drying. Freedom. The sun shone brighter. The air felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking backward. I was looking ahead, and just as I turned to leave, a familiar voice called out. Didn't think I'd see you again. I glanced up. Mia, the hotel waitress. She stood, near the entrance, a small smile on her lips, her dark eyes watching me with quiet amusement. I chuckled, shaking my head. Yeah, Well, life's full of surprises. She tilted her head. So, what's next? I exhaled, feeling the past finally slip away. Anything I want. And with that, I walked forward, toward something new, something better, something that was mine. The past was gone. But my future? It was just beginning.